The dust swirled across the empty platform as the last passenger train of the day pulled away from Cottonwood Springs, the rhythmic chugging fading into the vast expanse of the Wyoming territory. Katherine Jenkins stood alone, her worn leather boots planted firmly on weathered wooden planks, watching her last hope disappear into the horizon. The year was 1878, and at 22 she had never felt more abandoned. "Looks like they forgot about you," a deep voice drawled from behind. Katherine turned, one hand shielding her eyes from the setting sun. A tall figure approached, his silhouette backlit by the golden light. As he drew nearer, she could make out the weathered face of a man perhaps 5 years her senior. Dust clung to his denim trousers, and a revolver hung at his hip, partially concealed by a faded brown leather vest. His most striking feature was his eyes, clear and blue as a mountain lake. The train pulled away and no one called her name. The cowboy lifted her bag and smiled. "Owen Blackwell," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Station master mentioned somebody might be waiting for the Everett family." Katherine hesitated before taking his hand. "Katherine Jenkins. And yes, I was expecting the Everetts. I'm to be governess for their children." Owen's smile faded slightly. "Madam, I'm afraid the Everetts left town 3 weeks ago, packed up after Mr. Everett's mine went bust." The color drained from Katherine's face. "That cannot be. I received a letter just last month confirming my position." She reached into her handbag, fingers trembling as she searched for the correspondence. "I don't doubt it," Owen said gently. "But gold fever makes men do strange things. When the vein dried up, they couldn't leave fast enough." He looked down at the single trunk and carpet bag at her feet. "Seems you've come a long way for nothing." Katherine's throat tightened. Chicago was over 1,000 miles behind her. After her father's death and the subsequent discovery of his gambling debts, she had sold everything to pay his creditors, keeping only enough for a one-way train ticket and the promise of employment. "Is there another train today?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "Not until Tuesday." Owen shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "That's 4 days from now." "I see." Katherine straightened her shoulders, mind racing. 4 days in a town where she knew no one, with funds dwindling by the hour. Owen seemed to read her thoughts. "There's a boarding house down the street. Mrs. Holloway's a decent sort, might give you a fair rate." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I appreciate your kindness." She reached for her trunk, but Owen was faster. "Let me help you with that." He hefted the trunk with ease, picking up her carpet bag with his free hand. "And it's just Owen, madam. Mr. Blackwell was my father, and he's been gone these past 8 years. As they walked down the dusty main street, Katherine took in her surroundings. Cottonwood Springs was larger than she had expected, with a general store, a saloon, a small church, and various other establishments lining both sides of the wide dirt road. "Town's grown some since the silver strike last year," Owen explained, noticing her interest. "Nothing like Denver, of course, but we've got most necessities." Katherine nodded absently, her mind still reeling from the shock of her situation. The Everetts had been her last hope, a desperate gamble to avoid destitution after her father's creditors had stripped away everything familiar. Mrs. Holloway turned out to be a plump, red-faced woman with sharp eyes that assessed Katherine from head to toe before naming her price. $3 for the week, meals included," she declared, "and I don't abide late hours or gentlemen callers." It was steep, but Katherine had little choice. She handed over the money, painfully aware that it left her with barely enough for a train ticket back east if she could even find employment there. "I'll leave you to get settled," Owen said, setting down her trunk. "If you need anything, I'm usually at the livery or my cabin just north of town." "Why are you helping me?" Katherine asked suddenly. Owen looked surprised by the question. "My ma always said to be kind to strangers. Besides," his smile returned, warm and genuine, "not many new faces come through Cottonwood Springs these days, especially ones as pretty as yours." A blush crept up Katherine's neck, and she looked away. "Thank you again, Mr. Owen." After he left, Katherine sat heavily on the narrow bed, allowing herself a moment of despair. Everything she had planned, everything she had hoped for, had evaporated in an instant. She was alone in a strange town, nearly penniless, with no prospects and no connections. Yet as the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Katherine made a decision. She would not allow this setback to defeat her. Tomorrow she would find work, any work, and make her own way. Morning came with the sounds of a town awakening. Katherine dressed in her plainest day dress, a serviceable navy blue cotton with minimal ornamentation. After a breakfast of cornbread and bacon provided by Mrs. Holloway, she set out to find employment. The general store was her first stop. Mr. Peterson, the proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose, listened politely to her inquiry before shaking his head. "No need for help at present, Miss Jenkins. My wife and daughter manage the store just fine." The dressmaker, a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Winters, gave her a similar response. "I barely make enough to feed myself, let alone hire an assistant." By midday, Katherine had tried every respectable business in town with the same result. No one needed help, or if they did, they couldn't afford to pay for it. The schoolhouse already had a teacher, the hotel a housekeeper, and the doctor a nurse. She stood in the middle of the street, the hot sun beating down on her, feeling utterly defeated. Only one establishment remained untried. The Silver Dollar Saloon, its swinging doors opening and closing as men wandered in and out, seeking respite from the heat. Katherine hesitated. A lady of proper upbringing did not enter such places, yet her current circumstances hardly allowed for such niceties. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and marched toward the saloon. The interior was dimly lit compared to the bright sunlight outside. It took her eyes a moment to adjust. Several men turned to stare at her entrance, conversations halting mid-sentence. A barkeeper with an impressively waxed mustache raised an eyebrow. "I believe you've taken a wrong turn, miss," he said, polishing a glass. "The church is 2 blocks east." Katherine approached the bar, ignoring the curious glances. "I'm looking for work, sir." The barkeeper's eyebrow climbed higher. "We don't employ ladies of your sort here." "I can serve drinks, clean, keep accounts," Katherine said quickly, understanding his implication. "I'm not seeking other employment." A deep chuckle sounded from her left. She turned to find Owen leaning against the bar, a half-empty glass in front of him. "Miss Jenkins," he nodded, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Expanding your job search, I see." "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged stiffly. "Necessity has made me less particular about my employment prospects." "No luck elsewhere, then?" His expression softened with genuine concern. "None whatsoever." Owen considered her for a moment, then turned to the barkeeper. "Frank, Miss Jenkins here is a woman of quality. If you need help with the books or serving drinks, you could do worse." Frank looked skeptical. "A proper lady serving whiskey to miners and cowboys? That'll be the day." "I can assure you, sir, I am quite capable," Katherine said firmly, "and I learn quickly." "She needs the work, Frank," Owen added quietly, "and you've been complaining about the accounts for months." Frank sighed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I suppose I could use help with the ledgers. Previous girl ran off with that drummer last month." He named a sum that was less than half what Katherine would have earned as a governess, but it was something. "When can you start?" Frank asked. "Immediately," Katherine replied, relief washing over her. "Come back at 5 then. I'll show you the books." Outside, Katherine turned to Owen, who had followed her out of the saloon. "Thank you for speaking up for me." He shrugged, adjusting his hat against the sun. "Seemed the right thing to do. Though I admit I never pictured you working in a saloon." "Neither did I," Katherine said with a small laugh. "But beggars can't be choosers, as my father used to say." Owen studied her face. "You're a long way from home." "Home doesn't exist anymore," she replied, surprised by her own candor. "My father died 6 months ago, leaving nothing but debts. The governess position was my chance to start over." "I'm sorry," Owen said simply. He glanced down the street, then back at her. "I've got to see to some business at the livery, but would you allow me to escort you to dinner this evening, to celebrate your new employment?" Katherine hesitated. She barely knew this man, yet there was something about him and honesty in his eyes, perhaps that made her trust him. "I would like that," she said finally, "though I must be at the saloon by 5. "I'll come by Mrs. Holloway's at 4 then." He tipped his hat and walked away, his stride long and confident. Katherine watched him go, a strange fluttering in her chest. In the space of a day, her world had been turned upside down twice, first by disappointment, then by unexpected opportunity. As she made her way back to the boarding house, she wondered what other surprises Cottonwood Springs might hold. The afternoon passed quickly as Katherine prepared for her new position. She carefully mended a tear in her second-best dress and polished her only pair of good boots. At precisely 4 o'clock, a knock came at her door. Owen stood in the hallway, his usual dusty attire replaced by clean trousers and a pressed white shirt. His dark hair was slicked back, still damp from washing. "Miss Jenkins," he said with a slight bow. "Mr. Blackwell," she returned, noting the effort he had made. "You clean up well." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Don't let appearances fool you. I'm still just a ranch hand with dirt under my fingernails." "A ranch hand?" she asked as they descended the stairs. "I thought perhaps you worked at the livery." "I help out there sometimes," he explained, "but mostly I work for the Circle B Ranch, just north of town. Owner's an old friend of my father's." The restaurant attached to the hotel was small but clean, with tablecloths and proper silverware. Owen pulled out a chair for her, a gesture that reminded Katherine of a life she had left behind. "So," he said once they were seated, "tell me about Chicago." "It's noisy, crowded, and constantly moving," Katherine said, surprised by the nostalgia that swept over her. "After the Great Fire, they rebuilt much of it. The buildings are taller now, and there are shops and theaters everywhere." "Sounds overwhelming." "It can be. But there's something exhilarating about it, too, the sense that anything is possible, that life is happening all around you." She paused, remembering. "My father loved it there. He was a professor of literature at a small college. Books were his passion." "And yours?" Katherine considered the question. "I love books too, but I also enjoy music and art. I studied to be a teacher before." She trailed off. "Before you had to become a governess," Owen finished for her. "Yes." She didn't elaborate on the financial ruin her father's gambling had brought, the shame of watching their possessions auctioned off, the pitying looks from former friends. Some things were still too raw to share. Their food arrived beef stew with fresh bread, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. "What about you?" Katherine asked eventually. "Have you always lived in Cottonwood Springs?" Owen shook his head. "Born in Missouri. My father brought us west when I was 12, chasing rumors of gold. We never struck it rich, but he found work as a blacksmith. After he passed, I tried my hand at prospecting for a while, then cowboying. Turns out I'm better with horses than with gold pans." "And your mother?" A shadow passed over his face. "Lost her to typhoid when I was 15. It was just Pa and me after that until the consumption took him too." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly, recognizing the familiar pain of loss in his eyes. "Been a long time now," Owen replied with a slight shrug, but she could see the wound hadn't fully healed. "What matters is making something of the life you've got left." The conversation turned to lighter topics, the latest news from the East, the upcoming town festival, the peculiarities of Cottonwood Springs residents. Katherine found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn in by Owen's dry wit and observant nature. All too soon, it was time for her to report to the Silver Dollar. Owen insisted on walking her there, though it was only a short distance from the hotel. "I enjoyed this," he said as they stood outside the saloon's entrance. "As did I." Katherine surprised herself by how much she meant it. "Perhaps we could do it again sometime." "I would like that." The words came easily, without the hesitation she might have expected. Owen tipped his hat, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good luck in there, Miss Jenkins. If anyone gives you trouble, Frank knows how to handle it, and I'm never too far away." With that reassurance, Katherine entered the saloon to begin her new life. The Silver Dollar was busier than it had been that morning. Men crowded around tables playing cards, while others stood at the bar. The piano in the corner remained silent, the stool empty. Frank spotted her immediately and waved her over to the bar. "Right on time," he said approvingly. "Office is in the back. I'll show you the ledgers." The small room behind the main saloon was cluttered but organized in its own way. Shelves lined with bottles of liquor covered one wall, while a desk piled with papers occupied another. Frank pulled out a thick leather-bound book. "These are the accounts. Income on the left, expenses on the right. Previous girl was decent with numbers, but she left things a bit of a mess when she ran off." Katherine examined the ledger, noting several inconsistencies immediately. "I can straighten this out," she said confidently. "Good. Once you've got a handle on the books, I might need you to help serve drinks sometimes. Busy nights mostly. Katherine nodded, though the thought made her nervous. Serving drinks in a saloon was far removed from the life she had envisioned for herself, but she reminded herself that pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. The next few hours passed quickly as Katherine immersed herself in the ledger. By closing time, she had already identified several errors and created a more organized system for tracking inventory. "You've got a good head for numbers," Frank commented as she prepared to leave. "Come back tomorrow, same time." Katherine walked back to the boarding house escorted by one of the bartenders at Frank's insistence. The night air was cool, the stars brilliantly clear above the small town. For the first time since arriving in Cottonwood Springs, she felt a small glimmer of hope. That hope grew stronger over the following days. Her work at the saloon proved more interesting than she had anticipated. Frank was fair if gruff, and the customers largely treated her with respect once they understood she was there to manage the books and occasionally serve drinks, not to provide other entertainments. Owen stopped by the saloon each evening, sometimes staying for a drink, other times just checking in briefly. On her day off, he took her riding outside of town, showing her the breathtaking vistas of mountains and valleys that surrounded Cottonwood Springs. "It's beautiful," Katherine said, gazing at the landscape spread before them. They had stopped at a high point overlooking a lush valley where a river wound like a silver ribbon through green meadows. "It grows on you," Owen agreed. "First time I saw these mountains, I thought they were the most magnificent thing I'd ever seen. Still do." "I've never been anywhere like this," Katherine admitted. "Chicago has Lake Michigan, of course, but this feels like standing at the edge of the world." Owen smiled at her enthusiasm. "That's what I love about the West. There's still so much to discover, so much untamed wilderness. Makes a man feel small and significant all at once." As they rode back to town, Katherine found herself studying Owen's profile against the setting sun. In just a week, he had become a fixture in her new life, a steady presence she found herself looking forward to seeing each day. "What will you do now?" he asked suddenly. "Stay in Cottonwood Springs or try somewhere else?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought beyond immediate survival. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "The work at the saloon is sufficient for now, but it's hardly what I trained for." "Town's growing," Owen pointed out. "Might need another teacher soon, especially with all the new families coming in for the silver mines." "Perhaps." Katherine hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why do you care what I do?" Owen reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "Because in the short time you've been here, Miss Jenkins, I've come to admire you. Your determination, your willingness to take whatever work you could find, your refusal to give up." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "And because I find myself hoping you might consider staying." The directness of his answer made her breath catch. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything yet," Owen assured her. "We've only known each other a short while, but I'd like the chance to know you better, if you're willing." Katherine looked into his earnest blue eyes and found herself nodding. "I would like that, too." They rode back to town in a comfortable silence, both aware that something had shifted between them. The next morning brought unexpected news. Mrs. Holloway intercepted Katherine as she came down for breakfast, her usually stern face animated with excitement. "There's a letter for you, Miss Jenkins," she announced, holding out an envelope. "Came on yesterday's mail coach." Katherine took the letter with trembling fingers, recognizing the handwriting immediately. It was from her former employer in Chicago, a wealthy merchant named Mr. Crawford. She opened it with trepidation, scanning the contents quickly. "Good news?" Mrs. Holloway inquired, making no attempt to hide her curiosity. "I'm not certain," Katherine replied honestly. "Mr. Crawford, my previous employer, writes that his sister in Denver is in need of a companion for her daughter. He recommends me for the position." "Denver?" Mrs. Holloway exclaimed. "That's a proper city, not like our little town. Fine houses, theaters, all the modern conveniences." "Yes," Katherine said absently, still reading the letter. The position offered a generous salary, room, and board in what was described as a mansion on Capitol Hill, and the society connections Katherine had once valued. "When would you leave?" Mrs. Holloway asked. "The letter suggests as soon as possible. There's a draft for train fare enclosed." It was the opportunity she had been hoping for, a respectable position in a proper household, far more suitable than serving drinks in a saloon. Yet as Katherine considered it, she felt an unexpected reluctance. "You'll be telling that nice Mr. Blackwell, I suppose," Mrs. Holloway said with a knowing look. "He's sweet on you. Anyone can see that." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "We're merely friends." Mrs. Holloway's snort made it clear she didn't believe that for a moment. "Friends indeed. Well, you could do worse than Owen Blackwell. He's a good man, steady. Owns a piece of land north of town, I hear, building a cabin on it too." This was news to Katherine. Owen had mentioned working at the Circle B ranch, but had said nothing about owning land himself. She tucked the letter into her pocket and headed to the saloon, her mind churning with conflicting thoughts. The position in Denver represented security, respectability, everything she had been seeking when she left Chicago. Yet the thought of leaving Cottonwood Springs, of leaving Owen, created an ache in her chest she hadn't anticipated. Frank noticed her distraction as she worked on the ledgers that morning. "Something troubling you, Miss Jenkins?" he asked gruffly. Katherine hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I've received an offer of employment in Denver, a respectable position as a companion to a young lady." Frank's bushy eyebrows drew together. "I see. When would you be leaving us, then?" "I haven't decided whether to accept yet." This seemed to surprise him. "Seems like a better prospect than tallying whiskey bottles in a saloon." "Perhaps," Katherine agreed. "But I've found Cottonwood Springs to be unexpectedly welcoming." Frank's weathered face softened slightly. "This town grows on you, I'll grant you that, and certain residents seem particularly fond of having you around." He nodded toward the swinging doors where Owen had just entered. Katherine felt her heart leap at the sight of him, confirming what she had been reluctant to admit to herself. In the short time she had known him, Owen Blackwell had become important to her, far more important than she had realized. Owen spotted her and crossed the room, his smile widening. "Miss Jenkins," he greeted her. "Beautiful day outside. Thought you might like to join me for a picnic lunch, if Frank can spare you." Frank waved a hand dismissively. "Take her. These books won't run away." Outside, the sun bathed the town in golden light. Owen led Katherine to where his horse was tethered, a picnic basket secured to the saddle. "I thought we might ride out to the creek," he suggested. "There's something I'd like to show you." They rode north out of town, following a well-worn trail through stands of cottonwood trees. The air was cooler here, fragrant with the scent of pine and wildflowers. "You're quiet today," Owen observed as they rode side by side. Katherine considered deflecting, but decided against it. "I received a letter this morning, an offer of employment in Denver." Owen's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained steady. "That sounds like a good opportunity." "It is," she agreed. "A respectable position with a wealthy family, everything I came west hoping to find." "When would you leave?" "As soon as possible, according to the letter. There's train fare enclosed." Owen nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "Denver's a fine city. Growing fast, lots of opportunities." "Yes." Katherine waited for him to say more, to give her a reason to stay, but he remained silent. They reached the creek, a clear stream that burbled over smooth stones. Owen dismounted and helped Katherine down, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. He spread a blanket in the shade of a large cottonwood tree and unpacked the basket cold chicken, bread, cheese, and a jar of preserved peaches. "This is lovely," Katherine said, trying to recapture the easy companionship they had shared before. "I thought you might like it." Owen hesitated, then pointed to a clearing on the other side of the creek. "That's my land over there. 20 acres, stretching up to that ridge." Katherine looked where he indicated. "It's beautiful. Mrs. Holloway mentioned you were building a cabin?" "Started it last month." There was a note of pride in his voice. "It's not much yet, just the foundation and part of the frame, but it will be solid when it's done. 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, even a porch where you can sit and watch the sunset." "It sounds wonderful." "I think it will be." Owen's gaze was intense as he looked at her. The kind of place where a man might raise a family someday. Katherine's heart quickened at his words and the meaning behind them. "Owen." "I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but I've never met anyone like you, Katherine. You're brave and determined and beautiful, and the thought of you leaving—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know what to do," Katherine admitted. "The position in Denver is everything I should want." "Should want," Owen repeated. "But is it what you do want?" Katherine looked around at the creek, the trees, the mountains in the distance, then back at Owen, his face open and honest, waiting for her answer. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "When I came west, I had such clear plans. Be a governess, save money, perhaps eventually open a small school of my own. But then everything changed. And now? And now? Now I find myself reluctant to leave this place, to leave certain people." A spark of hope lit Owen's eyes. "Then don't go," he said simply. "Stay in Cottonwood Springs. Stay with me." It's not that simple. But even as she said the words, Katherine wondered if perhaps it was. What future could I have here? Working in a saloon isn't what I trained for, what I dreamed of. "The town's growing," Owen reminded her. "They'll need a proper school soon, and until then—" He took a deep breath. "Until then, you could help me build the cabin. Make it into a home." Katherine's eyes widened at the implication. "Are you proposing to me?" "Not exactly, not yet." Owen reached across the blanket to take her hand. "I'm asking you to give us time to know each other better, to see if what I feel, what I hope you feel too, is real and lasting." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, hers smaller, but no longer as soft as they once had been. 2 weeks ago, she had been a desperate young woman with no prospects. Now she found herself choosing between a secure position in Denver and the possibility of love in this small frontier town. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." Owen's disappointment was visible, but he nodded in understanding. "When do you need to decide about Denver?" "The letter didn't specify, but I imagine within the week." "Then take the week," he suggested. "Get to know the town better, get to know me better, and if, at the end of it, you still want to go to Denver, I'll drive you to the station myself." It was a fair offer, more than fair. Katherine nodded, squeezing his hand. "A week, then." The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Katherine. She continued working at the saloon during the day, but her evenings were spent with Owen. He showed her every aspect of Cottonwood Springs, the small but growing school, the newly built church, the plans for a proper town hall. He introduced her to people he knew, the ranchers who came into town for supplies, the miners fresh from the silver diggings, the shopkeepers and their families. Everywhere they went, people greeted Owen with genuine warmth and welcomed Katherine with open curiosity. "You're quite popular," she observed after a particularly friendly exchange with the blacksmith and his wife. Owen shrugged modestly. "I've helped out where I could. Last winter was hard on some of the outlying farms. A few of us from the Circle B took supplies to families snowed in." This casual mention of generosity was typical of Owen, Katherine had discovered. He spoke little of his own good deeds, but others were quick to tell her how he had helped build the schoolhouse, or rescued a child's dog from a mine shaft, or spent 3 days searching for a lost hunter. On the 4th day, Owen took her to see his cabin. The ride was longer this time, as they followed the creek deeper into his property. When they rounded a bend and the clearing came into view, Katherine gasped in surprise. The partial frame Owen had described was in fact well on its way to becoming a proper house. The walls were up, the roof partially completed, and windows had been cut into the solid pine logs. "You've been working on this every day," she realized, noting the fresh sawdust and newly split logs. "Whenever I can," Owen admitted. "Circle B gives me time off in exchange for breaking their young horses." He helped her dismount, then led her inside the structure. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace already built at one end. Doorways led to what would be bedrooms, and a separate area was designated for the kitchen. "It's beautiful," Katherine said, running her hand along a smoothed log wall. "You've done all this yourself?" "Had some help raising the walls," Owen said. "But the rest, yes." Katherine moved to one of the open windows, looking out at the view of mountains and sky. "It's so peaceful here." "That's what I thought the first time I saw this land." Owen came to stand beside her. "Felt like home right away." Home. The word resonated within Katherine. Her father's house in Chicago had been home once, filled with books and music and laughter. After his death, she had resigned herself to finding home in other people's houses, always the outsider, the employee. But standing in this half-built cabin, with Owen beside her and the vast Wyoming landscape spread before them, she felt a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever. "I could put shelves here," Owen said, pointing to a wall, "for books. I know you like to read." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to Katherine's eyes. "You would build shelves for books?" "Of course I would." Owen looked confused by her reaction. "Every home should have books, and music, too. There's a fellow in Laramie who makes pianos. Thought maybe someday, when the house is finished and the ranch is producing—" He trailed off. Perhaps realizing he had said too much, revealed too many of his hopes for a future that included her. Katherine turned to face him fully. "You've thought about all of this?" "Every day since I met you," Owen admitted. "I know it's fast that you barely know me. But sometimes you just know." Katherine's heart raced as he stepped closer, his blue eyes intense with emotion. "I'm not asking you to decide now," he said softly. "Just think about what life could be like here, with me." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Katherine found herself winding her arms around his neck, losing herself in the moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I should take you back," Owen said reluctantly, "before I forget myself entirely." The ride back to town was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they reached the outskirts of Cottonwood Springs, Katherine made a decision. "I'd like to see more of your land tomorrow," she said, "if that's possible." Owen's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'd like that very much." The next 2 days passed in a similar fashion, with Katherine dividing her time between work at the saloon and explorations of Owen's property and the surrounding countryside. Each hour spent in his company strengthened the connection between them, revealing shared values and complementary dreams despite their different backgrounds. On the evening of the 6th day, as they walked back to the boarding house after dinner, Owen asked the question that hung between them. "Have you decided about Denver?" Katherine stopped walking, turning to face him in the fading light. "I have." Owen waited, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes betrayed his anxiety. "I'm going to decline the position," Katherine said. "I'm staying in Cottonwood Springs." The relief that washed over Owen's face was swiftly followed by joy. "You're sure it's what you truly want?" "It is," Katherine confirmed, surprising herself with how certain she felt. "These past days have shown me something I didn't expect to find here, a sense of belonging, of possibility. And you," she took a deep breath, "you have shown me what it means to build something lasting, to look toward the future with hope instead of fear." Owen reached for her hands, holding them tightly in his own. "I love you, Katherine Jenkins. I know it's soon to say it, but it's true. I've loved you since the moment I saw you standing alone on that platform, looking so lost and yet so determined." "I love you too," Katherine replied, the words coming easily now that she had made her choice. "It happened so quickly, I hardly recognized it myself, but being with you, seeing the life you're building, it's what I want, what I choose." Owen's kiss was tender this time, a promise rather than a question. "There's something I need to ask you," he said when they parted. "Something I've been wanting to ask since I showed you the cabin." Katherine's heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" Owen dropped to one knee right there on the dusty street, heedless of the few passers-by who stopped to watch. "Katherine Jenkins, will you marry me? Will you help me finish that cabin, fill it with books and music and children someday? Will you be my wife, my partner in everything that comes?" Tears of happiness blurred Katherine's vision as she nodded. Yes, Owen Blackwell. Yes to all of it. The small church in Cottonwood Springs had never seen such an event. 3 weeks after Owen's proposal, Katherine walked down the aisle in a dress hastily made by Mrs. Winters, who had discovered a talent for wedding gowns she hadn't known she possessed. The entire town turned out for the occasion. Frank closed the silver dollar for the day, declaring that any man who needed a drink could wait until after his bookkeeper was properly married. Mrs. Holloway wept openly, claiming credit for bringing the couple together under her roof. Even the station master attended, remarking that it was the best thing to come from a missed connection in all his years of railroading. Katherine had written to her few remaining friends in Chicago, explaining her decision. Their replies had been supportive, if somewhat bemused by her choice to marry a rancher in Wyoming territory rather than accept a position in Denver society. As she spoke her vows, Katherine caught sight of the train pulling into the station through the church's window. Once, that train had represented all her hopes and fears, bringing her to a town where no one called her name. Now, it was simply part of the landscape of her new life, a life chosen freely, with love. The cabin was finished by winter, the shelves Owen had promised filled with books salvaged from Katherine's trunk and others ordered from catalogs. A small piano arrived the following spring, along with news that the town council had approved funds for a proper schoolhouse with Owen Blackwell named as the teacher. On their first anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Owen placed his hand on Katherine's rounded belly, feeling the movement of their unborn child. "Happy?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Completely," Katherine replied, covering his hand with her own. "Who would have thought that being left alone at a train station would lead to all of this?" Owen laughed, pulling her closer. "I knew the moment I lifted your bag. Some things you just know." Katherine leaned into his embrace, thinking of the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. The Everett's abandoned position, the saloon job, the offer from Denver, all steps on a path that had led her here, to this porch, this man, this life. "I'm glad the train pulled away," she murmured. "I'm glad no one called my name." "So am I," Owen agreed, kissing the top of her head. "So am I." As night fell over the Wyoming wilderness, the lights of their cabin glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of the home they had built together, a testament to love found in the most unexpected of places and a promise of all the years yet to come.